Okay, so Preston, we are back to talk about episode 6 of the Watchmen television series, This Extraordinary Being. And I gotta say, when we last left off on the previous podcast, I was somewhat convinced based on the previews that this was going to be kind of a boring, artsy type of episode to fill backstory, and I was thoroughly surprised and wrong.
Not that it wasn't an artsy type of episode. I mean,
it was.
It was as artsy as the season has gotten, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it was actually artsy in a very cool and interesting way, and I was actually thoroughly surprised by how much I did like the episode. I still think episode 5 was like probably the best episode so far, but this one also up there. I think this one is one of the better episodes of the season so far as well.
And it's the most political. I mean, it's the most like
yes, it is.
But it was there's a lot going on in this episode, a lot to talk about.
Oh God, yeah. I even wrote down a couple of things for you on Facebook, which I'll go into. But let me do the synopsis so we can get into this. So Angela took all the nostalgia pills, and Laurie Blake is trying to get Angela to agree to treatment before the nostalgia kicks in, but it's too late, and she starts experiencing Will's memories as a police officer in New York City in 1938. Now, the interesting thing here is that if you notice as the episode starts, Angela is the only person in actual color and then starts to fade into the whole black and white motif of the episode because she's trying to she's fully melding into Will's memories, which I like that at first I was kind of annoyed that everything was in black and white, but at the same time, it does grow on you after a while.
They lampshaded it all with when they talked about Schindler's List last episode, or I mean, they called it Pale Horse or whatever, the Steven Spielberg movie in their universe, but they lampshade it in that Schindler's List is all in black and white except for this one scene with a girl in red, and he talks about Pale Horse the same way. And so they kind of lampshade it and say, because they then the next episode do the same thing, black and white with a few color elements here and there. The color elements usually have to do with the massacre in Tulsa, and they kind of like bleed in different places in the background. Will's memories are all jumbled. And hanging over all of them is the Tulsa massacre. But at the same time, I do wonder if his memories are biased. I wonder if it's from his perspective, like our chapters in Game of Thrones, in Ice and Fire, where there's a little bias to it. There's just one thing later on where I wonder about it, but we'll see.
Actually, yeah, I know what you're talking. You're talking about the part where like he catches his son,
yes,
putting on the thing, and then like his wife acts like something's happened to you. So this has
but
changed
we haven't
you.
Seen
but he
anything really. Like
right.
Haven't seen him go too far. Like like
I mean, all he's really doing is killing like KKK members, which I don't really think he can go too far with killing.
And he's not
like,
telling
those
her.
guys.
It's not like he's coming home and saying, "Hey, I slaughtered all these KKK people." Like, what does she know about it? Like she just reads in the newspaper, body here, body there. But
and it's interesting that you say like maybe his perspective of the whole nostalgia pills is biased, because it reminds me of that one chapter in Game of Thrones. I believe it's Clash of Kings, where the Hound supposedly comes into Sansa's room and kisses her.
Yeah.
But then doesn't like George R. R. Martin later say like Sansa's not the most reliable narrator?
Right. So in the first Sansa chapter, when she's with the Hound, they do not kiss. But then when she reminisces on it, they kiss. There's a few examples of this. When Ariohota is observing a banquet, he actually says that Balon Swan didn't touch a spicy stew. But then later on he says, oh, he's sweating because he ate the spicy stew. Or no, I'm sorry. He sees Balon Swan eat the spicy stew, but then later on he sees Balon Swan sweat, and he thinks that he's sweating because he's nervous. And he's like, but he didn't touch the spicy stew, so he must be sweating because he's nervous. But earlier in the chapter, he did actually eat the spicy stew. So it's really weird. How George R. R. Martin does it. It's clever, and it makes a lot of readers crazy because they don't know what to believe.
Right. And apparently Will joined the police department because supposedly Samuel Battle, who was the first black police officer in New York City, actually based on a real guy. Samuel J. Battle is actually a real person who was literally the first black police officer in New York City. And but there's a whole thing here with Will being like obsessed with the law. Like the movie he watches in the first episode when he's a kid. I forgot the guy's name, but it's the marshal, the black marshal,
something Reeve, because it has it's the same name that he takes on, and it's supposed to be the Superman kind of thing.
And I wrote down a bunch. I just spammed you like a bunch of things I noticed, but we'll get into that. So let me go back to this real quick. Just the thing here. And while walking, so basically when he gets there, the guy who he kind of looked up to, the first black police officer, Samuel Battle, tells him essentially, beware the Cyclops. And eventually when he arrests a guy for trying to burn down a Jewish thing, he takes the guy in and some of the
Jewish delicatessen, yes.
Yeah, he takes the guy in, and the Cyclops men essentially take the guy away and let him go later on. And those same police officers try to hang him and basically let him off with a warning. And this is where the hood and noose come in. Now, originally, my thought behind this was that Will was the hooded justice, but because nobody knew who was under the mask, they just automatically thought he was a white guy.
Yeah. Now I will say in the original Watchmen comic, and this is a little bit of a retconning. They're pushing I have to say the creators here are pushing the limits of retconning with making Hooded Justice who he is. In the original comic, Hooded Justice is you see his skin being white, and they explain that, but they heavily imply that Hooded Justice is this German wrestler who is also a white supremacist. And in an interview, Alan Moore confirms and says, yeah, no, Hooded Justice used to be in the KKK, and that's why he has his outfit. So the creators of Watchmen have flipped it completely. Yeah, because so in the original Watchmen comic, the Minutemen are not great. They're a racist team, and certainly Captain Metropolis is racist, and they're worried about things like black unrest and things like that. If you have to examine the background of things, so it's a little bit of a retcon to do this, to change Hooded Justice. Like the whole point of the superheroes is that they're all kind of vigilante fascists, right wing kind of thing, and Hooded Justice was originally a KKK member, but now they flipped it and said that the guy that's inspired it all is a victim of the KKK.
I like that flip. I like that twist on it. That's actually a pretty interesting and pretty nice twist. I actually don't mind it. I'm sure a lot of people are going to bitch about them making it way too political. But no, I completely actually like that twist. That's actually not a bad twist. M. Night Shyamalan would be very proud of this. This is a very cool twist. But no, so after he's walking home from almost being, hung by his fellow police officers, he spots a woman and I guess her husband being mugged, and he jumps to the rescue and, dons the hood and, beats him up, and it makes the news. And eventually he's invited by Captain Metropolis, I forgot the guy's name, something Gardner, to join the Minutemen. Now, originally I thought the Minutemen were actually like the Watchmen, like they were legit heroes, but apparently not really. And it's also confirmed that what we saw in American Hero Justice Story last week, where Captain Metropolis and Hooded Justice were having gay sex, that's an actual thing. I don't know how they knew that, but that's an actual thing.
So, I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting which things they decided to push the limits on retconning and which things they didn't. So there's all this, when you read Watchmen, each issue has this kind of supplemental material at the end. And if you comb through the supplemental material, you can kind of learn about some of the background, the Minutemen, things like that. Not much in the actual story is on them. Now, there is a flashback in which the comedian is about to rape Laurie's mom, Silk Spectre 1. And Hooded Justice comes in and beats the hell out of the comedian. And the comedian is the one that kind of hints at the fact that, he's into weird sex stuff. And that's where, a lot of these rumors come from about him being gay with Captain Metropolis. And so it's like, they kind of treated it as stuff out of people's mouths in the original Watchmen comic. They've kept as canon, while the supplemental material, they kind of said, well, history is unreliable. These written newspaper stories don't really know the real story. Like, what can we get away with? He's also making a statement that American history it has been whitewashed and changed. And a lot of, very important events of the past, have been forgotten for a long time, including the Tulsa Massacre. And so, so it's clever what they're doing. It's pushing. I mean, nerds get really big into the canon, and so it's weird that they're strong enough they've been bold enough to actually mess with the canon a little on who Hooded Justice was and the Minutemen and stuff like that. But under the guise of, well, you learned this one history one day, but the real truth is something else. And there's another side to it. So
interesting. Oh, by the way, his name is Nelson Gardner, Captain Metropolis. Interesting enough, someone told me that according to the HBO's PDpedia, Nelson Gardner apparently left his entire estate to Will when he died. So Will is actually a millionaire.
Yeah, which explain. Well, yeah. I mean, I guess we didn't need him to be a millionaire, considering Lady Trieu is also a millionaire. But now that they have the ability,
I figure she'd be a billionaire.
Yeah, billionaire. I mean, now that they have all this massive technology, now they have mind control. Who knows what can be going on? Yeah.
So Will is invited to join the Minutemen by Captain Metropolis, and then begins an affair with him. But apparently, Will finds out that the Cyclops gang is to try and hypnotize black people at movie theaters to incite riots amongst themselves across the country. And the Minutemen won't help.
Right.
And I messaged you this, and I was watching the episode. I'm like, so Captain Metropolis thinks that Moloch has a solar ray, but the whole mind control thing is ridiculous to him. And then I realized, oh, these guys are just fraud assholes. They're not even real vigilantes. They're just in it for the fame and money, because at one point you see another superhero, Dollar Bill, I believe it is, with the sign of the bank, and like these guys are just fraud assholes. They're not even real heroes.
There's a bit of it, certainly with Dollar Bill. Dollar Bill is not really a real one, but the solar mirror weapon. I'm trying to remember about that. I think they just mention it in passing. We don't really know what it's really about. I think in there, so it's mentioned briefly in the original Watchmen comic, and I think in the before Watchmen comic, that they made later, they went into more detail on it, on the Minutemen and stuff like that. But we don't really know anything about this solar mirror weapon, if it was a real thing or if it was just kind of made up, or who knows.
Well, in the show, they're making it sound like it's they're making it sound like it's bullshit.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the before Watchmen comic, it's a real thing, but it's just kind of mentioned in passing in the original Watchmen comic, and so they're making it into a whole bunch of bullshit, a whole bunch commercial bullshit to sell the bank advertisements or whatever.
And the whole Cyclops symbol that he's chasing throughout the entire episode, that Cyclops symbol was smeared on the walls of the 7th Cavalry headquarters in episode 5. And apparently, according to also the PDpedia, this is what someone told me, Senator Joe Keene's father was a part of this whole Cyclops thing. So apparently the Cyclops organization, or I don't know if this is a Cyclops organization or that they're just using it as the symbol for their organization, because it's essentially the Klan.
Right, and the Cyclops imagery is from the Klan. In the real world, the Ku Klux Klan had Cyclops imagery with it. So they're coming from a real place there. So, but before it was like grand, like how there's like grand wizards and grand dragons. There's like a grand Cyclops and things like that in the KKK. I know it.
It's always silly. I'm sorry. I always find that silly and funny.
I know it's like
whatever.
It's sad that they were the first Dungeons and Dragons players. It's a bad legacy for D&D. But and I don't want to jump to the end already. Do you want to get to the end, because the end is
well,
fascinating.
Let me just finish out the synopsis here from Wikipedia. Essentially, he destroys the Cyclops operation in New York City, and according to this, he becomes disillusioned with his role, leaving his family. I thought his family left him, but maybe the person who wrote this doesn't know what's going on. Yeah. And when we get back to the present, I was right the entire time, because if you recall, when we did the first episode of this podcast, I was like, there's no way that old man hung him. And I was right, but I was wrong, because Will didn't hang him. Will somehow reverse engineered their whole mind control thing and had Judd hang himself.
Yes. Which is probably what now the big Mrs. Trieu Ray is, right? They're gonna mind control people to do something.
Right. So before we get into that, let me just because this episode really made a lot of comparisons of Will being like Superman.
Oh yeah.
So like Will Reeves is his name. Christopher Reeve, who is the actor who played Superman.
Well, there was a George Reeves who was in the original Superman.
Oh.
George Reeves was the original Superman in the original like TV show. He ended up killing himself. But yeah,
so I didn't know
he
that.
actually has the last name Reeves. Well, it's Christopher Reeve without the S. But I'm sure they're referencing both when they name him.
Right.
But yeah.
And Will and Clark Kent are also very similar in the sense that they both grew up in the Midwest. Will being from Oklahoma, and Superman, Clark Kent, being from Kansas, and then they both eventually move out east to a bustling city. Superman's love interest, Lois Lane, is a reporter, and so is Will's wife. At one point, Will in the episode is in a phone booth and goes into doing his hero work, just like Superman does. And they even have the Superman comic in the episode, Action Comics #1.
Yes.
And in the same comic, I never read Action Comics #1, but in the same comic, apparently Superman helps a woman in distress, just like Will does in this episode.
Yeah, Will helping the person in the alley is just, it's the biggest trope of superheroes, right? That the mugger getting somebody in an alley, and then the masked hero like helping them. It's like, how many of us go down alleys and get mugged and have somebody jump out? But apparently it's just the thing to do. Batman's parents were attacked in an alley, all in the Spider-Man movie. It's a million times, he does that.
And the one thing you pointed out that I really like is how, like, throughout the entire episode, as he's just like, walking down the street or doing whatever, the riots from Tulsa is like in the background, and it's showing that it's always in the back of his mind, like it's always there for him.
There was one scene there where I was really confused about, where I remember this police car drives up and they tell him, they ask if Will wants to get a ride home with them, or they're like, oh, we're going to the bar, and he's like, nope, don't feel like it, and they're like, okay, and then they drive ahead, and there's these bodies being dragged by the car, and I was like, oh, that's shocking. But I think the bodies are from the Tulsa massacre, and he's hallucinating that aspect to the car. I don't think, even though they're clearly threatening him, I don't think at that moment they were dragging two dead bodies behind them. Because I think those bodies are in color as well. So the memories are all jumbled around, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you want to talk about the ending? Let's talk about the ending.
Oh, the ending. I mean, so Will has made up his mind about Don Johnson, right? Clearly about Judd, and has him commit suicide. And then Judd had he spoken more, like Judd, considering he's about to get executed, he didn't speak very well for himself by saying like, oh, I'm trying to help you people, and this is my heritage and all of that. Like he probably could have spoken better to save himself, but he didn't speak enough to really sink himself completely. Like I feel like there's more to Judd that, Will didn't hear enough. Like Will was too dismissive and killed Judd before he was there to fully explain, right?
It's that stupid TV trope where two characters have a problem and one character walks out and then the other character, instead of going after them, they go, wait, no, wait! Ugh.
Yeah.
And essentially this is like, yeah, because he goes, I'm trying to help you people. So, what does that mean? Like, are you not really a part of them, but just because your father was a part of the Klan, does that mean that you're not a part of the Klan? Or are you somehow trying to stop Joe Keane? Like, what are you really doing? And I'm also kind of like...
Is he trying to stop him from the inside? I mean, according to Senator Joe Keane, he was trying to make sure that none of this ever happened again. So what are they trying to do? I mean, was Judd trying to dismantle the Klan from the inside? And thus being part of the Klan,
or maybe keep their like damage to as much as minimum as possible.
Yeah, maybe. Certainly Will was a little too dismissive, or maybe we're just feeling too much sympathy for a racist. Who knows? But Don Johnson, he's pretty likable. He's Angela's friend. It's so hard to believe that he was this evil guy, and then all of a sudden we find out he's this secret Klan member of perhaps the 7th Cavalry, part of the Cyclops conspiracy. Should he just be killed like that, or is there some other story? I feel like there has to be more.
I'm almost a little disappointed that our main villains, or so it seems, are just KKK members. It's almost like the tired trope of like Nazi zombies at this point. Like, I don't know. It's just I was kind of expecting more of an insidious conspiracy, and mind control is very insidious. But at the same time, like I was expecting like a secret underground group of like villains instead of it just being like white people who hate black people. I don't know. It just seems kind of... Maybe that's not really what it is, because every time you and I have a theory, we're either kind of right or we're just not right at all.
I mean, it was Joe Keane being evil just was a little too obvious. Judd being evil was a little too obvious. And so we still haven't heard their full plan. Like, what are they really trying to do with their little 7th Cavalry racist organization? Are they really trying to turn it around and do something good? What is that exactly? We kind of know that Will has gone too far. He's lived an incredibly horrible life. He's been through a lot. And you can tell that he's gone to this extreme. If he's talking about building a freaking mind control array with Lady Trieu,
that's what I think the Millennium Clock might be, because... Here's the thing, though. I have no idea how the fuck the Klan... Because when I think of the KKK, I think of, like, dumb yokels.
Yeah.
But how the hell do they have, like, a mind control device? And, okay, Will has his hands on it. Then how come nobody else has ever been able to replicate this technology? Because you think that this would be used fairly often against people's enemies.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a metaphor, but... Because back in the movies, the early movies, there was anti-black sentiment in movies. I mean, Birth of a Nation caused a huge rise in the number of people that were in the Ku Klux Klan. Movies did not portray blacks very well. And so, metaphorically, yes, it was like the movies were weaponized to destroy black people, giving them no good role models and all of that, or that's the statement being made. And so, Lady Trieu's huge clock, which now has perhaps a global maybe it has a huge global reach. I mean, movies now have global reach. So in a sense, like these movie theaters, they have, the message that Lindelof is saying here is that, there's a huge responsibility with our pop culture. Our pop culture, can weaponize feelings, and things like that. I mean, Jesus Christ, I'm sure we have Australian listeners, but imagine the fucking movie Crocodile Dundee came out, close to 35 years ago. They're still dealing with that movie and what it and what it did to the whole world's perception of Australia. They're still dealing with it. One stupid movie from the 80s, and now everybody thinks that everyone in Australia, is wrestling crocodiles and killing them with knives and living in the outback. So, I mean, movies can be really powerful, which is the statement being made. But yeah, but Lady Trieu is clearly not a protagonist either. So when Angela woke up, Lady Trieu was reading Ayn Rand, and so Alan Moore, when he wrote Watchmen, really, really hated Ayn Rand and Ayn Rand thinking. He thought that was the worst. That people should be focused on their individual self welfare, and everything else, is not important. But Ayn Rand actually believed that caring about society and social programs and things like that were harmful because she thought it, bred laziness in people. And yeah, she had a whole bunch of other beliefs. She was an atheist and things like this, but which doesn't meld with a lot of Ayn Rand lovers today, or people that claim they're into Ayn Rand. So Rorschach, when he's designed, he thinks that Rorschach would be like an Ayn Rand follower, that everything's about individualism. And so it's strange that the Rorschach followers, we don't really know what yes, they're racist like Rorschach was, but we don't know what they believe on a social level. Do they believe in individualism? Do they believe in society and people helping each other out? Clearly Lady Trieu, if she's reading The Fountainhead, she doesn't believe in society either. So she's, it's that right there is a signal that she's a villain, or at least against Alan Moore's thinking. And having seen enough stuff from Lindelof, I don't think he would be an Ayn Rand follower as well. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some Ayn Rand lovers out there listening to us, but yeah, the Watchmen comic was definitely against her teaching, and I think so is Lindelof.
I'm actually very curious to find out what Alan Moore thinks. Is Alan Moore alive?
He is.
I'm actually curious to find out what he thinks about HBO's Watchmen, because this really does take liberties with the characters he's created and kind of flips them around a little bit, especially with the Hooded Justice being a gay black man. I don't even know if he's gay. He might be just bisexual, because he does have a wife. Now I'm actually very curious to find out what his true thoughts on this are.
So it is kind of, I saw some interviews with him about that took place around the time of the Watchmen movie. The Watchmen movie had come out, and they said, "Do you ever plan on watching that movie?" And he's like, "No, fuck no." And they're like, "Why? And why not? Aren't other people allowed to do stuff with your work? I mean, you do stuff with other people's work. You have the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen." And he's like, "Yeah, you make a good point, but it's still my property. It's still my creations." And so I personally, I understand that logically speaking, objectively, I have nothing to complain about, but subjectively, it's still my stuff, and I'm going to subjectively be angry about it. He hates DC Comics. He hates any money-making attempt at his, to take advantage of his creations, even though he got money selling them. So he's kind of a hypocrite. But I know he never plans on seeing it. And he said that his friends had seen the Watchmen movie and told him he wouldn't like it, so don't watch it. And so whether he would ever like watch this would all depend on if his friends told him, yeah, no, you should watch it. I don't think he ever will, but.
That's a shame, too, because it's really not bad, but at the same time, you kind of have to... I don't know. We discussed the HBO's plans for the Game of Thrones prequel Blood Moon, and how supposedly it was going to be all about, like, white people versus black people, and how black people were the original inhabitants of Westeros, and some magical curse turns them into the children of the forest. I would also be curious to think what George R.R. Martin would think about that, because they're essentially retconning his story in a sense, but at the same time, does George Martin even consider Game of Thrones like an actual adaptation of his stuff, or just another universe? Kind of like how Marvel does with their Spider-Man stuff, where in one universe, Spider-Man is Peter Parker, in another universe it's Miles Morales, in another universe it's Gwen Stacy. Maybe Alan Moore can just see this as not the prime universe, but another alternate one.
So George R. R. Martin is much more polite, and he plays ball a lot better than Alan Moore. I mean, Alan Moore is a kind of just fuck you all. I'm going to do my own thing. The system sucks. You all suck. Young people suck. Old people suck. Everybody sucks. Like George R. R. Martin, he's got his anger at certain groups, but I've never heard him talk trash about HBO. I've never heard him talk trash about D&D. Like he always plays
but his whole thing with George is like the whole thing is subtle. For example, I recall we haven't gotten to that chapter yet in Fire and Blood, but I recall there's a chapter where I believe Alysanne rides one of her dragons to the wall. And how long it actually takes her to get from, I believe, Winterfell to the wall. So I guess that's a subtle dig at what happened in season 7, how Dany's able to like fly from Dragonstone to the wall in like a matter of days, when it took Alysanne a little longer.
Yeah, I mean you are right that there are a few of those little things in there that. Like him saying that the Faceless Men would never be this clumsy. Like they wouldn't just create a huge scene. And you're like, come on, he has to be making a joke about the show when he says that. Maybe.
So you're right. Maybe he is more polite, but at least he's more subtle about it, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would just like to I would love to get Alan Moore's like whole like thoughts on this whole thing, because it is interesting.
I think, like, from what we've seen, I think he would find it interesting, but at the same time, like, he's angry and bitter enough that he would find a reason to hate it. I think he would find some reason to not like it. Yeah, it's funny though, because I've read interviews with Lindelof, and he's like, Alan Moore is like my deadbeat dad. Like, this is how he's gonna feel. Like. I know he hates me. I know he hates what I'm doing, but I love him, and I'm just like trying to get his affection, but I know I'm just gonna fail. It's like wow.
But this episode, I think I gave episode 5 a 9. I would give this one an 8.5 maybe, because it really was actually fairly good. It was actually very good, actually. I did like it a lot. Not as much as the last episode, but one of my major complaints of this episode, not enough Ozymandias. He did not appear at all in this episode, which is fine, of course.
I think the reason, I mean, I thought it was a great episode. I think it's I don't think it hit the same level as last episode, because the whole noir black and white setting that his flashbacks were in, I think they created it. It made it a little more cartoony. Like he didn't feel quite real, like Looking Glass did. Like Looking Glass, you feel like you could run into that guy on the street, and you could understand him. He's just this divorced guy. He's paranoid. He's going through some shit. Like you feel like you could understand him. He felt a little more real. And this was just a little, it was surreal, you know, it was magical realism going on with these memories, and it didn't make it quite as emotional as the Looking Glass episode, but it was still really good. It was still really great.
I agree with you on the whole emotional thing, and I do like how this, even though this is Will's story, they sprinkle it not as often as I expected, but just enough to make you, just to remind you that this is Angela experiencing this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And she wasn't in it like a whole bunch, but this was Will's story.
Every once in a while you see her in the mirror, that kind of thing. Yeah. And
once again, Will probably, because I think they went into somewhat of detail about how they do the memory thing. They put a chip in your brain or a chip in your head, and then they extract the memories and put them into pill form. So you're probably right. Will's memories are a little biased, because when his wife really gets pissed off at him and threatens to take the kid away, like, he didn't do anything. All he did was kill KKK members, and that was it.
Yeah.
So he probably did something that he is most likely shutting away that we're not aware of.
Yeah, and I wonder, because, you know, nostalgia, like, they're supposed to choose your best memories, you know, so there's perhaps he can pick and choose which memories he wanted to give to Angela.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's not getting everything, right? She's not getting his, like, I don't know. He's not getting when he's, like, masturbating when he's 15, right? Like, she's getting, like, the important things, right?
I love you, Preston. Always go into the gross, dirty things, of course.
No, but I mean, God, imagine if somebody else, like, got to relive your life and, like, got all of your memories. You'd be
I'm
like,
good.
Oh, no.
I'm all right.
Oh, no.
And this also explains, like, what was happening with Lady Trieu's either daughter or clone. Because remember, I believe in the episode, I think it was episode 4, the daughter gets up and tells the mother what she was experiencing, and, you know.
Oh, God. And it just occurred to me, like, Lady Trieu, if she's really such a freaking individualist, like an Ayn Rand extremist, maybe she's taken individualism so far that she doesn't even want to have children. She just wants to have a clone of herself to replicate herself, because herself is the only thing that matters.
This is probably the second Lady Trieu. I think that's what you said last time. And that's all she's doing is replicating herself over and over and over again, and
because she's so self-obsessed.
Yeah. And training the next generation of Lady Trieu to continue on some type of work.
Oh, God. Oh. So yeah, there's a theory that Will, with his mind control, convinced Ozymandias to sell his company to Lady Trieu, and that's why she has it.
But how come these yokels were able to build a mind control device, and Ozymandias and all these other people who are incredibly, like, smart and you know, have so much wealth never really thought to do it, or like, how did they get the technology? Like, where does it really come from?
Yeah, I don't know. And I mean, I feel like Ozymandias, like, would have tried to stop Lady Trieu if he were still around. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's why he's imprisoned or out of the picture. Or dead,
on one of the moons of Jupiter.
On one of the moons of Jupiter.
Like, that kind of says something about a person's power, that they're so powerful or so smart that you don't want to kill them because you could need them in the future, but you need them out of the way. So much so out of the way that you have to imprison them in outer space as far away as you possibly can on one of the moons of Jupiter.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we'll see. Oh, did you also, like, it didn't occur to me until we finished with our last podcast, but when Ozymandias is on that moon of Jupiter, he says, "Save me, D," but, like, the instant assumption is Dr. Manhattan, but the owl's name is also Daniel. So it might be that he's saying "Save me" to the owl, but, you know,
isn't the owl in prison?
Yeah, according to the Peteypedia, I guess. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, Preston, what would you give this on a scale from 1 to 10? You go by numerical average. I go by grading. I would give it an 8. Very good.
Yeah, I think I'd give it an 8 as well. It's really good. Yeah.
I really liked it. It was a good episode. Not as good as episode 5.
I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. I was watching the whole thing. Like like every moment, I'm very very engaged. Which I'm watching a few other shows, and it's just not this. It's not at the same level where I'm like, oh man, Watchmen's coming out. Like, what's gonna happen next?
Yeah, I immediately tune in for Watchmen as soon as it's out. By the way, what were you? So last episode, the last episode podcast we did, I got Yellow Dollar signed, and I was gonna tell you we were talking about this briefly before we started the podcast. You want to hear this bullshit, bro?
What's that?
For the audience that doesn't know, when you get Yellow Dollar sign, your video doesn't get posted on recommendeds, or sometimes it doesn't go to subscription boxes and so on and so forth. Check this out. Supposedly, remember episode 5 we discussed the whole thing with the squid? Check this out. According to Manual Review, a human actually listened to the entire thing and disagreed with me that this contained like some controversial topics, such as modern acts of terror, events resulting in a catastrophic loss of human life, and controversial social issues. Now, controversial social issues I understand, but the whole fake terror attack of a giant squid falling on New York is
wow.
Really? Like, are you kidding me? Are you serious?
I mean,
really?
That's
oh my
really
god.
Weird that if you mention something like that, then all of a sudden you're talking about terrorism, and then you're gonna get a yellow dollar sign.
What? Oh my god. Are you kidding me? Are you a giant squid? Really?
So I got yellow dollar signed for, and none of my videos have ever gotten yellow dollar signed.
Oh, congratulations!
Except I got one for season 8 fixed part 5. I have no idea.
Didn't you release that like months ago?
Right, but for not suitable, and I had a manual review of it, and they're like, yup. And I was like, what? What happened? I think, how in there, maybe, I don't know, maybe they thought that my Qyburn poisoning Cersei thing was too violent or something. But like everything else, like, we're pretty vulgar. We're pretty dirty. Like, we talk about Game of Thrones, which has a lot of bad stuff in it. Nothing ever gets yellow dollar signed until that one. So I don't know.
But that's a random ass video. They're going back in time watching your shit.
What? It happened. I want to say it happened like 2 weeks after it was posted.
Okay. I was about to say I thought it happened recently, but
recently. Okay. Yeah, no, yeah.
But even so, 2 weeks after the fact. Like, are you kidding me, guys?
Yeah,
are you serious?
Yeah, it's really odd. I don't know.
This is why, like, guys, we appreciate it if you do support us on Patreon. You don't have to support us both. If you're a fan of Preston has his. Fan of mine, I have mine. But YouTube is going crazy. Seriously, a giant squid? YouTube, really? Come on.
Squid.
My God. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you again next time for another episode of Watchmen. Once again, if you haven't been watching, which I don't know why you're watching this if you haven't been watching it, but you definitely should. I keep constantly saying this to a lot of my European friends. Like, I always thought that going into this show, like, nobody from Europe could really kind of relate to this because, like, social issues with the U.S., blah, 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 blah. But they really should, if you're outside the U.S. or if you have friends outside the U.S., you should really start watching it, recommend your buddies outside.
You've really changed, because I remember after episode 1 talking to you, we can go back to the podcast and bring it up, I'm not lying, but you were like, yeah, it's pretty good, but I'm going to keep watching, but if you make it to, I usually give everything the 3-episode try.
Yes.
Now you're freaking hooked. You are.
Yeah, yeah, I'm hooked. Like, it's interesting, and I gotta say, I always hate when they do, not to sound like one of those assholes, but I always hate when they do, like, political bullshit just for the sake of political bullshit. But it's actually nuanced, and the writing is good. Like this is like political bullshit that's actually interesting. It's not just on the nose just for the sake of views and, like, clicks and whatnot. Like they're not like writing. It's not like one of those bullshit articles where they just like it's like clickbaity and and all that stuff. So it's nuanced. It's good writing. I like it. Nice twist. it puts a clever hook on things. Like, I like it. It's good. It really is good. I highly recommend this to a lot of people, especially people outside the U.S., but I don't think they would like it as much. I know a couple of my friends who are European. They tried it. They didn't like it that much, but I still recommend it nonetheless.
Yeah. Do you ever heard the if you're Asian when you go into the bathroom and you're American when you come out, what are you when you're in the bathroom?
I don't know.
European. That's like a 12-year-old joke.
Wait, Preston, was that a dad joke? Did you
dad.
just dad joke me?
No,
Oh my god!
I was saying it was like a joke at
Congratulations!
12-year-olds.
Was that your first dad joke? All right, bro. There you go. Now you're getting in the spirit of it. You just had your kid a while ago, and now you're making dad jokes? Oh, man. Careful, because people are going to bitch. They're going to want a dad joke at least once every podcast episode. I don't know if you're up for that. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.